They told her Americans were monsters who would torture and kill her. But when that cattle car door opened on a freezing morning in 1945, the enemy soldier didn't aim his gun at her. Instead, he asked 3 simple words that shattered everything she believed. This is the true story of how one question changed a life, for the freight yard sat on the edge of what used to be a busy German town. Now it was just piles of broken buildings and streets filled with rubble. The American Third Army had pushed through 2 days before, and the fighting had moved east. What was left behind was the cleanup. Sergeant James Miller's unit got the job of checking the rail yards. It was standard procedure. Look for hidden weapons, supplies, anything useful. Maybe find some soldiers who had not gotten the message that the war was over for them. The morning was freezing cold, the kind that gets into your bones even through a heavy coat. Frost covered the ground and their breath came out in white clouds. A dozen cattle cars sat on the tracks, abandoned and quiet. Some had their doors hanging open and were empty. Others were still sealed shut. Miller's squad moved from car to car, checking each one. Most were empty or filled with abandoned military supplies. Crates of bullets, medical equipment, boxes of paperwork that nobody would ever read. Then they reached the 7th car. Private Rodriguez tried the door, but it was locked from the outside. A heavy chain was wrapped around the handles with a padlock. That was strange. Miller stepped forward to look at it. Why would someone chain a cargo car shut? What were they trying to keep inside? He ordered Rodriguez to cut it. Rodriguez pulled out bolt cutters from his pack. The chain snapped with a loud crack that echoed across the empty yard. The smell hit them first. Not the smell of death, thank God, but something else. Unwashed bodies, human waste, sickness. Miller pulled open the heavy sliding door and morning light flooded into the dark inside of the cattle car. At first he could not see much. His eyes needed to adjust. Then shapes became clear. People, mostly women, maybe 20 of them, sitting in groups along the walls of the car. They wore torn uniforms, the gray-green of German military helpers, nurses, clerks. Some had blankets around their shoulders. Others just sat in the straw that covered the floor, staring at nothing. The car was freezing. No heat, no padding on the walls, just wooden walls and a metal roof. In one corner, a bucket served as a toilet. The smell was terrible. These women had been locked in here for days, maybe longer. But what caught Miller's attention was the woman chained to the support bar in the center of the car. She was younger than the others, maybe in her mid-20s. Her nurse uniform was dirty, torn at the shoulder and stained with blood, though he could not tell if it was hers or someone else's. Her dark hair was messy. Her face was covered with dirt. Metal cuffs locked her wrists and connected by a short chain to a metal bar that ran up and down through the car. She could not stand up all the way. The chain was too short. She could not sit down all the way either. She was stuck in this half-bent position with her legs shaking from being so tired. When the door opened and light poured in, the women reacted in different ways. Some covered their faces as if expecting to be hit. Others just stared, too tired to care. A few whispered to each other in German, their voices barely heard. The chained woman looked up at Miller. Her eyes were dark and sunken from lack of sleep and food, but they were not empty. There was still something there, fear, yes, but also a kind of quiet strength. She expected the worst. She had been told what Americans did to prisoners, especially women. She had heard the stories, the rumors, torture, rape, murder. She was chained like an animal, and now the enemy had found her. Miller stood in the doorway with his rifle hanging at his side. Behind him, Rodriguez and the others waited and watched. The sergeant was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face marked by 3 years of war. He had seen a lot, too much. Dead soldiers, destroyed cities, refugees walking in endless lines. But this was different. This was one German being cruel to another German on purpose. He looked at the chained woman for a long moment. She looked back, waiting for whatever came next. Her breathing was quick and shallow. Her whole body was tight, ready for pain. Then Miller did something none of them expected. He lowered his rifle, set it against the side of the car door, and stepped inside. He moved slowly, carefully, like you would move toward a scared animal. He did not want to frighten her more than she already was. He stopped a few feet away from her, bent down to her eye level, and in simple, clear English. Knowing she probably would not understand all of it, but hoping his tone would show what his words could not, he asked her one question. When did you last eat? The question hung in the cold air. Not who are you, not why are you chained, not where are your commanders, just concern about her basic needs. When did you last eat? The woman stared at him, her lips shook. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had been preparing herself for cruelty, for hatred, for violence. She had gotten herself ready mentally for whatever the Americans would do to her. But this question, this simple human concern, completely broke her down. Tears began streaming down her dirty face. Her shoulders shook. She tried to speak, tried to answer, but all that came out was a cry, then another. Then she was crying openly, unable to control it. All the fear and pain and tiredness of the past days poured out of her in broken sobs. Miller did not move. He just stayed there, bent down in front of her, waiting for her to breathe. Behind him, Rodriguez moved uncomfortably. This was not what any of them had expected to find today. After several long minutes, the woman's crying got quieter. She was still shaking, but she had pulled herself together a little. Miller stood up and called back to his men. "Rodriguez, get the bolt cutters," and someone radio back to command. "Tell them we need medical people here. Multiple civilian prisoners, at least one in bad shape." Rodriguez moved forward with the bolt cutters. The woman pulled back when he got close, but Miller held up his hand in a calming way. "It is okay," he said softly. "We are going to get you out of those chains." She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. She watched as Rodriguez put the bolt cutters around the chain connecting her cuffs to the bar. One squeeze and the chain snapped. Suddenly she could move, she could sit down properly. She immediately fell to the floor of the cattle car, her legs giving out from being so tired. The cuffs were still on her wrists, connected by a short piece of chain, but at least she was not tied to the car anymore. Miller pulled a canteen from his belt. He unscrewed the cap and held it out to her. "Water," he said, pointing. "Drink." She stared at the canteen like it was magic. Her hand, shaking badly, reached out and took it. She brought it to her lips and drank, not quickly but carefully, like someone who had been without water for too long and knew better than to drink too fast. After a few swallows, she lowered the canteen and looked at Miller again. This time something different was in her eyes, not just fear, something else, confusion maybe, disbelief. While this was happening, other soldiers were helping the rest of the women out of the cattle car. Most could walk, though they moved slowly and stiffly. A few needed help. One was carried out on a makeshift bed. She had collapsed from lack of water and could not stand. Within an hour, medical people arrived. Captain Sarah Mitchell, an Army nurse, took charge of the situation. She was a no-nonsense woman from Ohio, 35 years old, who had seen her share of hurt soldiers. But even she stopped when she saw the condition of these prisoners. "Jesus Christ," she said quietly, looking at the group. Then louder, "Okay, let us get them organized. Anyone with serious injuries over here. Everyone else, we are going to do basic checks. Blood pressure, temperature, look for signs of infection or disease." The German women were terrified of the medical staff at first. They did not understand the English commands and thought the worst, but Captain Mitchell had dealt with scared civilians before. She moved slowly, spoke softly, and made sure to show them everything she was doing. A thermometer was not a weapon. A stethoscope was not a torture tool, just medical equipment. The chained woman, Miller still did not know her name, was the last to be checked. Mitchell bent down beside her, much like Miller had done. The nurse noticed the cuffs right away. "We need to get those off," she said, looking at Miller. "Do we have a key?" "No key," Miller replied. "We will have to cut them." Mitchell nodded and pulled out her medical kit. First things first. She needed to see the damage. The cuffs had cut into the woman's wrists. The skin was raw, bleeding in places, infected in others. Mitchell cleaned the wounds as gently as she could, but the woman still pulled back at every touch. "How long has she been like this?" Mitchell asked Miller. "Do not know. Days at least, maybe longer." Mitchell shook her head in disgust. Who does this to their own people? It took Rodriguez another 15 minutes to carefully cut through the cuffs without hurting her more. When the metal finally fell away, the woman just stared at her freed wrists. She rubbed them gently, feeling the missing weight. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks, but she did not make a sound this time. Once the medical checks were done, food was brought in. The Army field kitchen had prepared a basic meal. Soup, bread, some canned vegetables. Nothing fancy, but it was hot and there was plenty. The German women were gathered in a cleared area near the rail yard, sitting on blankets that soldiers had laid out for them. They watched with wide eyes as metal cups of soup were handed out. The smell of food was overwhelming. Most of them had not eaten in 3, maybe 4 days. Miller personally brought a cup to the young nurse. She was sitting away from the others, still looking confused. When he held out the soup, she did not take it at first. She just stared at it, then at him, as if waiting for the trick. Where was the catch? What did he want in return? It is okay, Miller said gently. Just soup. You need to eat. Finally, she took the cup with both hands. It was warm, the first warm thing she had held in days. She lifted it to her lips and sipped. The soup was thin, mostly water with some vegetables and bits of meat. Nothing special, but to her it was the best thing she had ever tasted. She drank slowly at first, then faster. She had to force herself to slow down again. Her stomach, empty for so long, fought against the sudden food. She felt sick, but she kept drinking. She needed this. Around her, the other women were having similar experiences. Some cried as they ate, others laughed, short, desperate bursts of laughter that came from relief and disbelief. One older woman, a clerk from Mannheim, kept repeating the same thing over and over in German. They are feeding us. They are actually feeding us. Captain Mitchell watched the scene with mixed feelings. Happy because these women were finally getting the care they needed. Sad because of what it said about their own army, their own commanders who had left them to die in a locked cattle car. After the soup, there was bread. Fresh bread from the field kitchen, still a little warm. The women tore into it like it was gold. Bread had been hard to find in Germany for years now. Real bread made from wheat flour instead of sawdust and potato starch was almost never seen. The young nurse ate her bread slowly, enjoying every bite. She had not tasted anything this good since before the war, maybe even longer. Her family had never been rich and good food was always rare. As she ate, she became aware of Miller watching her. Not in a scary way, more like he was checking to make sure she was okay. When their eyes met, he nodded slightly as if to say, "See, we are not monsters." She did not know how to respond. All her life she had been taught that Americans were the enemy. Brutal, savage, uncivilized. The propaganda had been constant. But this man had cut her free, given her water, fed her, asked if she was okay. Nothing made sense anymore. By late afternoon, plans had been made. The women could not stay at the rail yard. It was open and not safe. They needed proper shelter. A temporary camp had been set up 3 miles away in what used to be a German military building. The German army had left it when they ran away, and now it was used as a holding area for prisoners of war and displaced people. Trucks arrived to move the women. They climbed aboard slowly, still weak from what they had been through. The young nurse was the last to get on. Miller helped her up, offering his hand. She stopped for just a moment before taking it. His hand was warm, rough, strong. He pulled her up easily. "Thank you," she said quietly in German. "Dank." Miller nodded, understanding the word even if he did not speak the language. "You are welcome," he replied. The truck ride was bumpy but thankfully short. The women sat in the back, wrapped in army blankets. Nobody spoke much. They were too tired, too overwhelmed. Everything that had happened in the past few hours was still sinking in. The building, when they arrived, was basic, but it worked. Rows of beds with actual mattresses, not just straw, blankets. Pillows, a washroom with running water, cold but running, toilets that flushed. After days in that cattle car, it felt like heaven. Captain Mitchell was there watching over everything. "Okay, ladies," she announced, using a German-speaking translator to help. "These are your rooms for now. Each of you gets a bed. We will bring dinner in a few hours. There is a washroom down the hall. Please clean up if you can. We will give you fresh clothes tomorrow." The women spread out slowly, each claiming a bed. Some just fell onto the mattresses, not even bothering to take off their dirty clothes. Others headed straight for the washroom, desperate to feel clean again. The young nurse chose a bed near the window. She sat on the edge of it, testing the mattress. It was firm but comfortable, so different from the wooden floor of the cattle car. She lay back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in days, she felt something close to safe. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cattle car, felt the cuffs on her wrists. But she also saw Miller's face, heard his question, "When did you last eat?" 3 simple words that had broken through years of propaganda and fear. The enemy was not supposed to care, but he had cared, and she did not know what to do with that knowledge. The days began to form a pattern. Wake up at dawn with the sound of a bell. Roll call in the yard, not for military order, but to make sure everyone was accounted for and healthy. Then breakfast. Real breakfast, oatmeal, sometimes eggs, bread with butter, coffee. The women could not believe the amount of food. After breakfast, there were work assignments. Light work, nothing hard. The Americans needed help sorting through captured German documents, translating things, organizing supplies. The women who had been clerks and secretaries were put to work in offices. Those with medical training, like the young nurse, were assigned to help in the camp hospital. Her name, they learned, was Margaret Schultz. She had grown up in a small town outside Stuttgart, the daughter of a baker. She had trained as a nurse before the war, worked in a civilian hospital until 1943, when the German army forced all available medical people to serve. She had spent the last 2 years of the war treating wounded soldiers, first in field hospitals near the Eastern Front, then in Germany itself as the Allies closed in. When the Reich collapsed, she had tried to go home, but the roads were chaos. Refugees everywhere, soldiers running away, the SS still killing deserters. She had been picked up by military police, accused of running away, and thrown into that cattle car with the other women. The officer in charge had chained her specifically because she had talked back, argued that they should surrender instead of running. That act of speaking up had earned her days of suffering. Now working in the American hospital, Margaret found herself in a strange position. She was helping care for wounded German prisoners under the watch of American medical staff. Captain Mitchell was her direct boss, and the two women quickly developed a working relationship based on respect for each other. Mitchell was impressed by Margaret's skills. Despite everything she had been through, the young German nurse was good at her job, careful and caring with patients. She worked long hours without complaining, grateful to be useful again. "You're good at this," Mitchell told her one afternoon, watching as Margaret expertly wrapped a soldier's leg wound. They talked through a mix of simple English, basic German, and hand signals. It was not perfect, but it worked. Margaret nodded, a small smile crossing her face. "Thank you," she said in careful English. She had been picking up words and phrases quickly. The routine was strange but comforting. 3 meals a day, every day, work that gave her purpose. A clean place to sleep, hot water for washing. These were basics, things any human being should have. But after years of war and hardship, they felt like incredible treats. The other women were adjusting too, some faster than others. The younger ones especially seemed almost relieved to be prisoners. The war was over for them, no more running, no more fear of bombing raids or SS shooting squads. They were safe, even if that safety came with barbed wire and armed guards. But the guilt was always there, hiding beneath the surface. Why were they being treated so well when Germany was in ruins, when their families were starving? Letters from home arrived sometimes. The mail system was a mess. Most of Germany's roads and buildings had been destroyed, but the Red Cross was working to reconnect families. When a woman's name was called at mail time, everyone held their breath. Would it be good news or bad? Margaret got her first letter 3 weeks after arriving at the camp. It was from her mother, written in shaky handwriting on a scrap of paper. Margaret sat on her bed, hands shaking as she unfolded it. The letter was short. Her mother was alive, but barely. The bakery was gone, destroyed in an air raid. Her father was dead, killed in the same raid. Her younger brother, who had been forced into the German army at age 16, was missing, probably dead too, though no official word had come. The town was occupied by French troops now. There was no food, people were eating grass, tree bark, anything they could find. Her mother was living in the basement of a destroyed building with 5 other families, sharing what little they had. Margaret read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked around the building. Clean beds, warm blankets. She had just eaten a dinner of beef stew and potatoes. More food in one meal than her mother probably saw in a week. The guilt was crushing. She was safe, well-fed, healthy. Her mother was starving, her father was dead, her brother was gone. And here she was, comfortable in an enemy prison camp. That night she did not eat dinner. She could not. The food turned her stomach. Captain Mitchell noticed and pulled her aside. "What is wrong?" Mitchell asked, concern in her voice. Margaret showed her the letter. Mitchell read it. Even though her German was not great, she understood enough. She handed it back, her face sad. "I am sorry," Mitchell said simply. "That is rough. My mother hungry." Margaret struggled with the English words. "I eat. She no eat." Mitchell nodded, understanding the problem. "I know it does not seem fair," she said, "but you starving yourself will not help her. You need to stay strong. Maybe someday you can help her, but not if you are dead." The logic made sense, but it did not make the guilt any easier to bear. Similar scenes played out across the camp. Women getting letters from destroyed families, cities in ruins. Loved ones dead or missing, hunger, cold, desperation everywhere in Germany. And yet here in this American prison camp, life was almost normal. The contrast was shocking, impossible to make sense of. How could the enemy show more care for German prisoners than Germany had shown for its own people? Despite the underlying tension and guilt, small moments of humanity came up. Interactions between prisoners and guards that went beyond strict military rules. Sergeant Miller visited the hospital regularly. Officially, he was checking on security and making sure everything was running smoothly. Unofficially, he seemed to be checking on Margaret. He would stop by her station, ask how she was doing, if she needed anything. Their conversations were limited by language barriers, but somehow they managed. Miller would bring things. A German-English dictionary he had found somewhere, chocolate bars from his food rations, cigarettes that Margaret could trade for other goods. Why, Margaret asked him one day, struggling with the English. Why help me? Miller shrugged. Because you needed help, he said simply, and because the war is over. You are not my enemy anymore. You are just a person who got dealt a bad hand. She did not fully understand all the words, but she got the meaning. To him, she was not the enemy. She was just another human being who deserved basic respect. Other guards showed similar kindness. Private Rodriguez, who had cut her chains, often stopped to chat with the German women during his rounds. He taught them English phrases, laughed at their pronunciation mistakes, shared stories about his family in Texas. One guard, a young man from Iowa named Patterson, played harmonica in the evenings. Sometimes the women would gather outside and listen to him play American folk songs, blues, tunes they had never heard before. It was strangely peaceful, sitting there in the fading light, listening to music that went beyond language and war. These moments did not erase the trauma or the grief. They did not solve the moral problem of being well treated by the enemy while your own people suffered, but they chipped away at the hatred bit by bit. Margaret found herself thinking about this often. She had been raised to see Americans as barbaric, uncivilized, cruel. The propaganda had been constant, but the reality was completely different. These men were just men. Some were kind, some did not care much. A few were harsh, but none were the monsters she had been told about. It forced her to question everything else she had been told. If they had lied about the Americans, what else had been lies? As weeks turned into months, Margaret's internal struggle got worse. Every day brought new proof that everything she had believed was wrong. The Americans were not monsters. Germany had not been the victim. The Reich's promises of victory and wealth had been empty lies, but accepting that meant accepting that she had been part of it. She had worn the uniform. She had served the German army. She had helped keep the war machine running, even if her role had been to heal rather than harm. One evening, she sat with Captain Mitchell in the hospital after most patients had been settled for the night. They had developed enough of a relationship that silence between them was not awkward. "Can I ask you something?" Margaret said, her English much improved now. "Of course," Mitchell replied. How do you not hate us Germans after everything?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. "I do hate what happened," she said finally. "I hate the war, the death, the destruction. I hate what your government did." "But you," she looked at Margaret directly, "you are not your government. You are a nurse who tried to help people. That is not something to hate." "But I served them," Margaret insisted. "I wore the uniform, I followed orders. So did millions of others," Mitchell replied, "some because they believed, some because they were forced, some because they did not know what else to do. You cannot carry the guilt of an entire nation on your shoulders. It will crush you. How do I live with it?" Margaret's voice cracked, knowing what happened, what we did. "You live by being better," Mitchell said. "You cannot change the past, but you can choose what kind of person you will be going forward. That is all any of us can do." It sounded so simple when Mitchell said it, but actually doing it, that was the hard part. Margaret was not alone in her struggle. The other women fought with the same questions. Late at night in the sleeping quarters, they would talk quietly among themselves. Some held on to the old beliefs. Germany had been right, the Allies were wrong. They had been defeated by bigger numbers and more resources, not because their cause was wrong. These women spoke of revenge, of Germany rising again, of settling scores. Most of the others avoided them, but many others, like Margaret, were questioning everything. They had seen the contrast between American treatment and German treatment. They had heard the stories coming out about what had really happened in the camps. Not the prisoner of war camps, but the other camps, the ones the Nazis had run. At first, most of them did not believe it. The stories were too horrible. Surely they were propaganda, lies, things made up to make the Allied victory look good. But then the Americans did something unexpected. They showed them the proof. One afternoon, all the prisoners were gathered in the main hall. A projector had been set up. An American officer stood at the front. "We are going to show you something," he said through a translator. "Some of you may not want to see it." But we think you need to understand what your government did, what was done in your name. The lights went out, the projector started. For the next hour, they watched footage from the freed concentration camps. Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Buchenwald, mountains of bodies, living skeletons staring at cameras with hollow eyes, gas chambers. Crematoriums, evidence of planned murder on a scale they could not understand. Some women looked away, others cried, a few fainted. Margaret watched it all, tears streaming down her face, unable to look away. When the lights came back on, the room was silent, complete crushing silence. We did not know, someone whispered in German. We did not know, but the officer who had shown the film heard her. Through the translator, he replied, maybe you did not, but someone knew. A lot of people knew, and now you know too. You can never say you did not know. That night, the sleeping quarters was different. The women who had held on to the old beliefs were quieter. Some were still in denial, insisting the footage was faked, but their voices were weaker now, less certain. Margaret could not sleep. She kept seeing those images, those bodies, those faces. How had it happened? How had an entire nation allowed this? The answer, she realized, was that they had chosen not to see. It was easier to believe the propaganda, to focus on their own problems, to convince themselves that surely it could not be as bad as people said. She had done the same thing. She had heard whispers about camps, about deportations, about disappearances. But she had told herself it was not her problem. She was just a nurse. She just helped people. She was not responsible. But silence was being part of it. Not acting was a choice. She understood that now. Miller found her the next day sitting alone outside the hospital, staring at nothing. You saw the film, he said. It was not a question. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. It is a lot to take in, he said. How do you, she struggled for the English words. How do you forgive after seeing that? Miller was quiet for a long time. I do not forgive what was done, he said finally. I cannot, nobody can. But you, he looked at her, you are not responsible for that. You did not do it. You did not even know about it. But I should have known, she insisted. I should have asked questions. I should have. You should have, yes, Miller agreed, surprising her. But you did not. None of you did, and you cannot change that now. What you can do is make sure it never happens again. You can make sure you never stay silent again. That is the only way forward. She understood then why he had asked that first question back at the cattle car. When did you last eat? It had not been about gathering information or showing power. It had been simple human compassion. He had seen a suffering person and wanted to help. That was the difference. That was what her government had lost, the ability to see enemies as human beings. The Americans had not lost that. Despite everything, despite all the death and destruction, they still saw people. The turning point came 6 months after Margaret's rescue from the cattle car. The war in Europe had been over for half a year. Japan had surrendered. The world was beginning the long process of rebuilding. In the camp, preparations were being made for sending people home. Most of the German prisoners would be sent home eventually, once the authorities decided they were not war criminals and had somewhere to go. Margaret's turn came on a gray November morning. She was called to the office and told that arrangements had been made for her return to Germany. Her mother was still alive, still in that small town outside Stuttgart. Margaret could go home. She should have been happy. She had been dreaming of this moment for months, going home, seeing her mother, starting to rebuild their lives, but instead she felt a strange emptiness. That evening she found Miller. He was off duty, sitting outside the camp headquarters, smoking a cigarette. I am leaving, she told him in English. Her accent was still thick, but her grammar had improved a lot. They say I can go home next week. Miller nodded. That is good, he said. You must be relieved. Yes, she said. Then more honestly, no. I do not know, he pointed to the spot beside him. She sat down. What is wrong, he asked. She struggled to put it into words. When I came here, I thought I knew who I was. German nurse, loyal to my country, but now she stopped talking. Now you do not know, Miller finished for her. Everything I believed was wrong, she said. Everything I was taught. Everything I thought I knew about the world. It was all lies, and I did not question it. I just accepted it. So do not accept things without questioning them anymore, Miller said. That is what you learned here. That is what you take home with you. But how do I live in Germany, she asked. How do I go back to a place that did those things? How do I look people in the eye knowing what happened? The same way everyone else will, Miller replied, by trying to be better, by building something new, by making sure it never happens again. He paused. Germany will need people like you, people who understand what went wrong and want to fix it. She looked at him, this American sergeant who had shown her more kindness than her own government ever had. "I want to thank you," she said, "for everything, for cutting me free, for treating me like a person, for asking when I last ate." Miller smiled. "You do not have to thank me for basic decency. That should be the standard, not the exception." "In my country it became the exception," she said quietly. "That is the problem." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the camp. Finally, Margaret spoke again. "When you found me in that cattle car," she said, "I expected you to hurt me. I expected violence, cruelty. That is what I had been told would happen, but you asked if I was hungry. You cared about me. And that broke something inside me. All the walls I had built, all the hatred I had been taught to feel, it all cracked because I could not hate someone who showed me kindness." Miller nodded slowly. "That is the power of treating people like human beings," he said. "It is harder to hate someone once you see their humanity. That is why propaganda always tries to make the enemy seem less than human. Once you see them as people, the whole thing falls apart." Margaret returned to Germany and found her mother. She worked as a nurse, helping rebuild her broken country. She married, had children, and told them the story of the cattle car and the American sergeant who asked a simple question. She taught them to never stop questioning, to never accept cruelty as normal, to never see other people as less than human. Years later, she would tell her grandchildren, "I was prepared for cruelty. I had built walls against it, but kindness broke through every defense I had. It forced me to see the truth. That people are people no matter what uniform they wear or what flag they fight under. And once you see that, you can never go back to hating. That is the power of three simple words." "When did you last eat?" A question that changed everything.